For 4 months, my boyfriend hasn't applied to a single job. I told myself it was temporary. Now I'm considering doing something I never thought I'd do. We met at work, which already tells you a lot about who we were at the time. I 30F was managing projects that ran on deadlines and consequences. My days were color-coded calendars, performance metrics, meetings stacked back to back. I liked knowing where I stood. I liked competence. I liked momentum. My boyfriend Jerry, 32M, worked in a creative role, ideas over execution, possibility over structure. He had an ease about him that felt magnetic in contrast to my tightly wound world. While I was triple-checking timelines, he was leaning back in his chair, talking through concepts like they were stories instead of deliverables. I noticed him because he wasn't frantic. He told me later he admired how put together I was. How I always seemed to know what I was doing. I told him I liked how calm he was, how he didn't seem ruled by pressure. It felt complementary, not conflicting. Opposites attract, right? For a long time, that felt true. About 3 months into dating, he mentioned, casually, like it was weather update, that his position was going to be eliminated. Not immediately, not suddenly, slowly. A long, bureaucratic process because of the union. Almost a year's notice. A year is loads of time, he said, shrugging. I'm not worried. I remember nodding, relieved. A year was loads of time. At first, it came up lightly. Me asking in passing, while we cooked dinner or walked home from work. Have you started thinking about what you'll do next? Not yet, he'd say. I've got time. Months passed. Seasons changed. My questions became more specific. Have you updated your resume? Looked at openings? Talked to anyone in your network? Each time, the answer was a version of not yet, wrapped in optimism. I work best under pressure. I don't want to rush into the wrong thing. Something will come up. I tried not to nag. Tried to trust his process, even when I couldn't see one. Meanwhile, my life was moving forward in very concrete ways. I had a savings account labeled house. Another one I jokingly called wedding, though the joke had started to feel less like a joke. My friends and I talked openly about timelines, about kids, fertility, what we wanted our 30s to look like. There were group chats about maternity leave policies. I had a timeline on my laptop. Nothing flashy, just stability, a home, a partner who could meet me halfway. His dreams were different. Maybe I'll write a screenplay, he said one night, staring at the ceiling. I've always wanted to try woodworking. What if I took some time to just figure things out? They weren't bad ideas. They just floated. No steps, no dates, no urgency. As his last day approached, my anxiety sharpened. I expected sadness from him, or fear, or at least a shift in energy. Instead, his final week felt oddly light. On his last day, his coworkers took him out for drinks. It felt celebratory, like freedom. He came home smiling, a little drunk, talking about how nice it felt to finally be done. I'm excited, he said. A clean slate. I smiled back. I meant to share his optimism. In my head, I was already mapping the next phase. Monday would come. The job hunt would begin. Applications, interviews, forward motion. Monday came. Nothing happened. And that was the moment when I realized we weren't just moving at different speeds. We were facing entirely different directions. Unemployment didn't arrive all at once. It seeped in. At first, it felt temporary. I told myself he deserved rest after the long, slow goodbye to his job. I told myself not everyone rebounds on the same timeline. Our days began to diverge almost immediately. My mornings were alarms and intention. Gym before work, coffee measured to the minute, a mental checklist running in the background, meetings, deadlines, groceries, laundry, meal prep. Structure was how I kept my anxiety quiet. His mornings stretched. I'd wake up to the sound of him still sleeping. By the time I was home from work, he'd tell me about the cafe he'd gone to, the podcast he'd listened to, the ideas he'd been researching. He talked about creative projects like they were already in motion, even though nothing had moved. I spent the day thinking, he'd say. I nodded, unsure what that was supposed to mean. Weeks passed. His routine solidified, not into productivity, but into comfort. The same sweatpants, the same spot on the couch. Scrolling, watching tutorials, bookmarking articles, always preparing, never starting. He wasn't asking me for money. Not explicitly, but things shifted anyway. I started paying more often. Dinners, tickets, weekend plans. Not because he asked, but because I didn't want him to feel bad. I told myself it was temporary. That couples support each other. He suggested cheaper activities with an earnestness that made me feel guilty for even wanting more. The math began happening quietly in my head. Who paid last time? Who was carrying what? I hated that part of myself. One afternoon, I came home early and found him exactly where I'd left him that morning. On the couch, laptop balanced lazily on his knees, sunlight slanting through the window. The room smelled faintly stale, like a place no one had left all day. He looked up and smiled. And something in me shifted. It wasn't disgust. It wasn't anger. It was distance. The man I'd met, the one with opinions and momentum and presence, felt strangely absent. Replaced by someone softer around the edges, harder to reach. I sat beside him, kissed his cheek, and felt like I was touching a version of him that hadn't fully arrived. I tried to help. Of course I did. That's my instinct. Solve, support, optimize. I bought him a resume writing service, framed it as a gift. He bristled immediately. I didn't ask for that, he said. It feels like you think I'm failing. I sent him job listings I thought fit his skills. Those are depressing, he said. I don't want to jump into something mood-ruining. Every attempt landed wrong. Every suggestion felt like pressure. Every question like judgment. So I stopped offering solutions. And started carrying the worry instead. By the 4th month, my stress had become ambient, always there, humming under everything else. I still loved him. I still laughed with him. But I no longer relaxed around him. I was bracing. For movement. For conflict. For clarity. And none of it came. The conversation didn't start because I planned it. It started because I came home exhausted. Work had been brutal. One of those days where every decision carried weight and every mistake felt expensive. I'd held it together through meetings, through managing people's crises, through being the steady one everyone leaned on. By the time I unlocked the door, all I wanted was to exhale. He was in the kitchen, making pasta. Music playing softly. He smiled when he saw me. "How was your day?" he asked. I opened my mouth and realized something that stopped me cold. I didn't know how to answer. Not because I didn't have words, but because I didn't feel like I had a partner who could hold them. Not really. I felt like I'd walk him through my stress, explain the context, simplify it, manage his reaction too. I sat down instead. A notification buzzed on my phone, my friend announcing her pregnancy. A picture of a tiny pair of socks. Joyful, terrifying. Something in me snapped into focus. "I'm really stressed," I said carefully. "About us." He stiffened almost immediately. "About what?" "About the fact that you've been unemployed for 4 months and don't seem to have a plan." Silence. Then, "I do have a plan." I waited. "I'm figuring things out," he said. "In my own time." "I need more than that," I replied, voice steady but shaking underneath. "I need a partner who's moving forward." That was when his tone changed. "You're not my manager," he said. "This is my career. It's none of your business as long as I'm not asking you for money." The words landed hard. "It is my business," I said. "Because we're building a life together. Or I thought we were." He shook his head. "You're putting your values on me. Being driven, goal-oriented, that's not something you should expect from a partner." I stared at him, not because I didn't understand, but because I did. "You're saying you don't want to be that person," I said quietly. "I'm saying that's not who I am," he replied. "And it's unfair to pressure me to change." The argument fizzled after that, not because it was resolved, but because there was nowhere left to go. We'd reached bedrock. That night, we moved around each other politely, carefully, like two people who'd discovered a structural flaw in the house they lived in. In the days that followed, he was wonderful. He made me tea when I worked late, asked thoughtful questions about my projects, listened while I vented, rubbed my shoulders without being asked. If someone had walked into our life then, they would have seen a caring, attentive partner. What they wouldn't have seen was the silence. The unspoken agreement. "We won't talk about that." His kindness felt real, and also strategic. Like love applied as a balm, or a distraction. A way to soothe me without addressing the wound. And the worst part, it worked. I stopped bringing it up. But every time he did something kind, a thought crept in uninvited. Is this partnership, or appeasement? I began to understand that the problem wasn't a rough patch. It was a mismatch in what we believed love was supposed to carry. Once the argument ended, the real work began. Not outwardly, internally. At night, while he slept easily beside me, I lay awake with my phone lighting my face, falling into the kind of internet searches that feel both desperate and responsible. Signs of depression in partners. How to support someone in a creative career. Is ambition necessary in a relationship? Fundamental incompatibility versus rough patch. Every article offered a piece of the puzzle, but none fit cleanly. He wasn't withdrawn enough to be clearly depressed. He wasn't striving enough to be simply blocked. He wasn't cruel or negligent or unloving. He was opting out. And there wasn't a neat category for that. I talked to friends, carefully at first, testing language, watching their reactions. One friend didn't hesitate. He told you who he is, she said, flatly. He wants a girlfriend, not a life partner. Believe him. I laughed it off at the time, but the sentence stuck. Followed me around, echoed back when I least expected it. Another friend, softer, romantic, took his side without meaning to. Love is patience, she said. People go through low points. You don't leave someone when they're finding themselves. I nodded, because that sounded right too. That was the problem. Both arguments made sense. Both felt compassionate. Both implied a different version of myself. One who stayed, one who left. I started therapy because I needed a place where I didn't have to perform balance. The therapist's office was quiet, neutral, safe. When she asked why I was there, I surprised myself by answering immediately. I'm afraid, I said. Of what? She asked gently. I'm afraid of building my life on sand, I said. I'm afraid of waking up one day and realizing I'm a mother to my husband instead of a partner. The words came out fast, like they'd been waiting. She didn't look shocked. She didn't rush to reassure me. You're not asking for a CEO, she said after a pause. You're asking for a co-pilot. I felt my throat tighten. And he's telling you, she continued, that he doesn't want to navigate. I sat with that. The relief was immediate and devastating. Because it meant my expectations weren't unreasonable. They were just unshared. I waited for a quiet Sunday evening, after dinner, after the dishes were done, when the apartment felt calm in that fragile way, calm sometimes does, like it could break if you touched it wrong. I told him ahead of time that I wanted to talk. Not in a dramatic way. Just, hey, can we sit down later? I need to talk about something important. He agreed easily. That alone almost stopped me. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't tense. He trusted that whatever I needed to say wouldn't threaten him. That trust made this harder. We sat on opposite ends of the couch. I folded my hands together because I didn't trust them not to shake. I want to say this carefully, I started. And I want you to hear it as coming from love, not criticism. He nodded. Patient, open, the version of him everyone else adored. I love you, I said. I really do. And because of that, I need to be honest about where I am. I told him I wasn't trying to control his career. I wasn't trying to rush him or turn him into someone he wasn't. I told him I understood burnout, fear, creative paralysis. I told him I had tried to be supportive, and quiet, and patient. But I'm at a point in my life, I said, where I have to plan. I can't just float, and I can't plan a future with someone if I don't know whether they're moving at all. He looked down at his hands. I don't need you to have it all figured out, I continued. I don't need a dream job or a 5-year plan. What I need is to see movement. Then I said the part I'd practiced in my head a dozen times. I need to see a concrete step. A resume update. A portfolio sent out. 5 job applications. Something real. Not for me to manage or monitor, but for me to be able to believe in us. I told him I wasn't asking for perfection. I'm asking for effort, I said. And I need to see it within the next 2 weeks. The room went very still. I rushed to soften it, because that's what I always did. This isn't an ultimatum about love, I said quickly. It's about information. I need to know whether our futures actually align. He was quiet for a long time. Longer than was comfortable. When he finally spoke, his voice wasn't angry. It was tired. I don't like being put on a timeline, he said. It makes me feel like I'm failing some test. I'm not testing you, I said. I'm checking compatibility. That landed harder than I meant it to. He sighed, rubbed his face. I just need space to figure things out. Pressure makes it worse. I nodded. I'd expected that answer. I'd prepared for it. I hear that, I said. But I also need to be clear about something. I took a breath. If nothing changes, if there's no movement, I won't be able to keep doing this. Not because I don't love you, but because love alone isn't enough for the life I'm trying to build. I hated how calm my voice sounded. He didn't argue. He didn't promise anything. He didn't reassure me. He just said, okay. And somehow, that was the loudest response of all. For the next 2 weeks, everything felt suspended. Every morning I watched for signs. A laptop open with purpose. A new document on the screen. An email drafted. Every night I told myself not to monitor. Not to count. Not to turn love into a checklist. But the truth was, I already knew what I was looking for. Not success. Direction. And deep down, I was bracing for what the silence might mean. The 2 weeks passed quickly. No dramatic fight. No slammed doors. Just days stacking on top of each other, ordinary and heavy. I went to work. He slept in. I came home. He asked how my day was. I asked what he'd done. Thinking, he said once. Researching, another time. Trying not to spiral. I nodded every time. I told myself not to interpret. Not to keep score. Not to turn love into surveillance. But the clock didn't care about my intentions. On the 13th day, I came home early. His laptop was open on the coffee table. For a second, my chest lifted. Hope, automatic and humiliating. It wasn't a resume. It was a half-written notes app document titled Project Ideas, the same one I'd seen weeks ago. Bullet points, untouched since the last time. Something in me went very quiet. That night, I didn't bring it up. I waited until the morning of day 14, when the deadline became real simply because it existed. We sat at the kitchen table. Sunlight through the window, normal sounds from the street. The world completely unconcerned with my private calculation. So, I said gently, "How are you feeling about the plan we talked about?" He didn't look surprised. He looked tired, cornered. "I've been under a lot of pressure," he said. "I feel like no matter what I do, it won't be enough for you." "That's not what I asked," I said. My voice was steady in a way that scared me. "Did you update your resume? Did you apply anywhere?" He looked away. "I tried," he said. "But every time I sat down, I just felt worse. Like I was failing you. And that kind of pressure just shuts me down." There it was. No applications. No resume. No concrete step. Just feelings. Real ones. Painful ones. But still, nothing. "I told you I don't work well with ultimatums," he continued, a little sharper now. This whole thing made me feel like I was on probation. I nodded slowly. "I know," I said. "And I hear that. But this wasn't about controlling you. It was about seeing whether we're actually moving in the same direction." He sighed. "I just need more time." And that was the moment it clicked. Not dramatically, not angrily. Just clearly. More time wouldn't change the direction. It would only delay the truth. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue the details. I said, "Okay." He looked up, confused. "Okay, I believe you," I said. "I believe you when you say this pressure shuts you down. I believe you when you say this isn't how you want to live." He relaxed, just a little, thinking this was relief. "And I need to be honest too," I continued. "I love the man you are in this apartment. You're kind. You're attentive. You make my life softer in small ways." He smiled faintly, hopeful. "But I cannot build a life with that man alone," I said. "I need a partner who meets me in the world of responsibility. Who can carry weight with me. You've told me, very clearly, that that's not who you are." His smile faded. "I'm not saying you're wrong," I added. "I'm saying we want different things." Silence filled the space between us. "So that's it?" he asked quietly. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't back down. "Yes," I said, "because staying would mean asking you to become someone you don't want to be, or asking myself to become someone I don't recognize." He didn't beg. He didn't yell. He just nodded, eyes shiny, like someone watching a door close slowly instead of slam. "I really thought you'd be more patient," he said. "I have been," I said. "That's how I know." The breakup was sad, logistical, almost tender. Dividing books. Deciding who keeps the couch. A long hug that felt like gratitude and grief tangled together. After he moved out, the apartment was too quiet. Then, slowly, it wasn't. I cooked when I wanted. I slept without listening for another person's inertia. My anxiety softened. Not gone, but quieter, like it finally had proof it wasn't imagining things. Sometimes, I imagined the alternative life. The version where I stayed. Where I accepted being the planner, the breadwinner, the engine. Where I bought a house alone and loved him as a companion, not a co-pilot. Where I learned to stop expecting and start managing my disappointment. I could see that life. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't the one I wanted. And for the first time in months, choosing myself didn't feel selfish. It felt honest. The grief came first, sharp and physical. It surprised me with its intensity, because I had already done so much mourning while still inside the relationship. But this was different. This was the loss of touch. Of habit. Of someone knowing how I take my tea without asking. The apartment felt strange at night. I slept diagonally across the bed like a teenager, then curled back into my old corner out of muscle memory. I cried in the shower. I cried in the cereal aisle. I cried at nothing, and moved through all of it, quietly. No more bracing myself before conversations. No more waiting for momentum that never came. No more feeling like the bad guy for wanting a future that had shape. The quiet of my own space stopped feeling lonely and started feeling clean. Dating again was terrifying in a way that felt oddly exhilarating. First dates where I talked too much. First dates where I said, out loud, I'm looking for a partner, and didn't apologize for it. Men who recoiled at that word self-selected out quickly. Others leaned in. Months later, a mutual friend mentioned, my ex Jerry in passing. He's still figuring things out, she said. Lots of ideas. I nodded, and realized, only afterward, that my chest hadn't tightened. There was no spike of jealousy. No urge to defend him. No secret hope that he'd finally turned a corner. Just a distant sadness. The kind you feel for someone you once loved deeply but no longer. I wished him well, and I meant it. The first few weeks alone were awkward in their silence. I woke up and realized the apartment didn't echo with his small noises anymore. The rustle of him shuffling through papers, the distant hum of the kettle, the soft click of his laptop closing. It was unnerving at first. My body was so used to coexisting with another rhythm that its absence felt like something had gone missing. But slowly, the quiet became permission. Permission to move without thinking of another person's comfort, to set the thermostat to my exact liking, to leave dishes in the sink without guilt. I bought a small potted plant and placed it by the window where he would never have thought to put it. It was silly, a minor act of autonomy, but as I watered it, I realized I was doing something just because I wanted to. I started noticing patterns in myself I hadn't before. How I used to tense up when I wanted something from someone else. How I tiptoed around discomfort. How I had stayed in that relationship longer than I should have because I believed love was endurance. Therapy sessions came to feel like weekly light switches, illuminating corners of my behavior I hadn't realized were darkened by old habits. The tendency to accommodate, the need to anticipate, the quiet self-erasure that had once felt like generosity. And in those moments came relief. Just a soft, steady sense of breath returning to my lungs. I could plan my evenings. I could make a grocery list and stick to it. I could spend a weekend reading on the balcony without anxiety prickling in the back of my neck. Dating again, when I felt ready, was difficult. I went slowly, observing how it felt to be interested without needing to manage another person's trajectory, without the fear that their inaction would compromise my future. I discovered quickly which men could meet me on that level, and which could not. Many self-selected out of my preference instantly, and that was fine. The ones who stayed respected my boundaries, my pace, my ambition, and my curiosity about life. Most importantly, I began noticing my own heartbeat in a way I hadn't in years. The small choices I made weren't filtered through someone else's passivity. My time was mine, my energy mine, my future mine to shape. And with that came clarity. The relationship hadn't failed because I had been too demanding or impatient. It had failed because our definitions of partnership had never aligned. Love alone, as I had learned painfully, is not enough to build a life together. Some nights, I thought about him. Not often, not with longing, just a human curiosity. Is he still figuring things out? Is he still living away from the life we both imagined sharing? The answer, when I checked with friends, was yes. And my chest remained calm. No jealousy, no guilt, only a distant, human pity, and a profound sense that I had chosen myself, finally, fully, without apology. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was not just surviving, but inhabiting my life. And that, more than any love story, more than any partner's gestures, felt like a victory worth keeping. I was folding laundry one evening, the soft hum of the washing machine filling the apartment, when it struck me with a kind of sudden, peaceful clarity. Partnership isn't about someone completing you, or matching your ambition, or filling your every expectation. It's about walking the same path together, carrying your own weight and trusting the other to carry theirs, choosing the same direction even when the road is uneven. I realized I had spent too long trying to fit someone into that definition who never intended to walk beside me. And in that moment, surrounded by the ordinary task of clean clothes and quiet light spilling through the window, I felt it. The steady, unshakable certainty that I could trust myself, and that whatever life I built from here, I would be the kind of partner I had always hoped to have, reliable, present, aligned with my own map, fully awake to the move ahead.